want some sauce?
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.
What's up, everybody? In this video we're going to be making corned beef, and essentially making corned beef is an awful lot like making pastrami. The only difference really is just pastrami you smoke, where corned beef you don't. Okay, but I'm going to end up making some corned beef and cabbage pretty soon, and so I just figured I'd make my own corned beef. And the type of meat that I'm using, once again, to me it doesn't matter, just cheap is good. I found this $6, right? And this is a loin top. It's going to work just fine for my corned beef. You want to use about 1/4 teaspoon of ground clove. If you use whole clove, just go ahead and give yourself about 2 teaspoons. I have a cinnamon stick here that we're going to throw inside there. Most of these herbs and spices you can get on the end cap, where they sell things like the Mexican herbs and spices, really cheap for like $1 and stuff, you know. So this right here is black pepper, and I'm going to be putting in about this much, which is almost a tablespoon, I guess. Coriander, okay, same thing, about a tablespoon. These are allspice berries. We'll put about a tablespoon. If you want to put some star anise in this, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. I'm going to put one inside there. Mustard seed, about a tablespoon. Ground nutmeg, I'm just going to end up putting like 3 little hits. This is kosher salt, and I want to put about 3/4 of a cup of salt in this. Some bay leaves, and maybe 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. And if you want to, you can put a little ground ginger inside this as well. Now we're going to put some water in this, and then we're going to put this on the stove and let it come to a boil, and basically turn this into like a tea. And I'm going to be letting the brine and the meat just stay in this bowl. This is going to go in the refrigerator for about 7 to 10 days. The longer you let it sit in the refrigerator and sit in the brine, the stronger the flavor is going to be. And you don't have to worry about the salt or anything like that being too heavy, because the meat can only hold so much. And if it is a little too salty, just like a day or so before you're planning on cooking it or whatever, you just cut off a small piece, fry it up, taste for saltiness. If it's too salty, dump out the brine, put just regular water in there, let it set overnight. It'll suck that extra salt out. Now, this is pretty much the same pickling spice that you would use if you were making pastrami. I mean, almost identical. The only thing is for pastrami, what you would want to do is you would want to put in a little bit more black pepper and a little bit more coriander. And another thing that you would put in for pastrami, and I'm going to be putting it in for this too, is some cloves of garlic. Okay, I just ended up smashing them. It was about, what, about 4, maybe 5 cloves right there. It's up to you. Now, when you first start cooking this up, it's not going to really smell too much like pastrami or corned beef. But after a few days of sitting in the refrigerator, it's going to start smelling like pastrami and corned beef. Depending on how old the spices are, it can change the flavor, you know, because as time goes by, spices, they start losing their oils and things like that. So this is one of the reasons why you want to put it in hot water, boil it, let it sit in there for a while, basically help it extract a lot of those aromatics and flavors and let it permeate throughout the water. So we're just going to go ahead and let this lightly boil here for maybe 5 minutes or so, just to make sure that everything gets softened up and whatnot. And then we're going to let everything cool. And we also want to add more cold water to this, okay, because this is very, very concentrated. What we have right here will be enough brine for probably a good 1.5 gallons of water. Now we need to cover this up well and then put it in the refrigerator. Okay, so it is time for us to actually start cooking the corned beef. Now, at this point, if you wanted to separate it and smoke 1/2, you would end up having pastrami, okay? In this particular case, I'm going to make both sides corned beef. And when we pull it out of the brine, it looks like this, okay? And I'm going to rinse this off first. Now, ordinarily, after you're done brining it, it'll be a little salty. So what you can do is soak it in water for like a day, and that's if you're going to be making pastrami. In this particular case, we're going to be boiling it, okay? So it's going to end up extracting some of that salt. So let's go ahead and put some water in this. You'll see I put quite a bit of water in there, and it's because we're going to be boiling this for a long time. And we don't want to have this on a super high temperature. We just want to get it to a boil, and after it gets to a boil, lower the temperature where it'll stay at a simmer. Throw your lid on it so you can maintain the water. Now, if you were going to be making pastrami, you can always watch my video on how to make homemade pastrami. You wouldn't do this. You know, what you would do is you would take this out and you would actually smoke it, and then you'd have your pastrami. But we're making corned beef. So we're going to have to boil this for a good 3-4 hours. Do not throw this water out, because we can use that water to also boil things like our cabbage and our potatoes to impart some of that flavor as well. So this has been boiling for about 2.5 hours right now, and it's getting close to fork tender. I think it's got about another hour. But like I mentioned before, the water that's in here, I don't want to throw it out, because this is going to be great water to throw my cabbage in. But I'm going to set this to the side, and when I say fork tender, a fork will go into it, but it's not really shredding apart, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, put a piece of aluminum foil or saran wrap over it to kind of keep some of the moisture in here, and set it to the side. But what we're going to do is we're going to get a few carrots here. We're going to peel these guys. Now, if you want to, you can boil these separately. In other words, in its own separate water, or you can bake them. I'm going to be using the same water that we had boiled the corned beef in to add a little bit of flavor to these guys. Okay. We now are going to end up dealing with the cabbage. The outer leaf I usually remove, even though there's nothing wrong with it. That's the one that everybody's been touching. It got exposed to everything, you know. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut this into quarters. Okay, so that would be halves, and this would be quarters. Okay, now the heart of the cabbage is a bit tough. Okay, so remove those. I gotta tell you, I get nervous anytime that I end up cooking cabbage. It was the last thing my grandmother ate before she died. She wasn't supposed to eat it. She did it anyway. And it only cost her her life. I'm going to put the cabbage in last, because the cabbage cooks quickly. But I'm at the same time as the carrots, I'm going to end up taking red potatoes. And you want to use a waxy potato. In other words, one that doesn't have a lot of starch, kind of like a regular Idaho potato. And so you want to use like maybe like a Yukon Gold, or you want to end up using kind of like a red potato. And I'm going to cut these up into sizes that I know will end up cooking about the same time as the carrots. We want these to be about the same size as the carrots, and then that way they'll end up cooking at the same rate as the carrots. Okay, so at this point is when you can add any type of herbs that you want to add. I'm going to kind of keep the herbs simple on this, and I'm going to put a little bit of black pepper in the water. Corned beef is in the water now, okay? But we can add herbs to help make this stuff a little bit more flavorful. So I added a little thyme to that, and the last thing I'm going to add is going to be some rosemary. Rosemary is one of those things that a little goes a long way. As far as the salt, we might have had a lot of salt be extracted from the corned beef. So really, you got to taste that water. There's more than enough salt in that. I don't have to add any, okay? But now, we're just going to let this come to a boil. When it does, turn it down a little bit, and just let it simmer. And 20-30 minutes, when the potatoes become fork tender, that's when you know they're done. Okay, there's only a few minutes between fork tender and them just starting to become really crumbly and falling apart. It's only a couple of minutes, so you got to keep an eye on it, okay? Okay, so I got a plastic fork, and I can put it inside a potato, okay? That is the fork tenderness that I'm looking for, where it's still got a little bit of solidity, I guess you can call it, rigidity. Because if I let this go much further, it's going to start breaking down, and you're going to end up having like a mashed potato. So I got to pull this out. So inside this soupy mess, we're going to throw our cabbage. And we only need this in there long enough to really cook, okay? Which basically is just a couple of minutes. I don't want this to become really mushy, and I don't want it to become sulfury. So as soon as I know that it's cooked and it's still got a little bit of bite, that's when I'm going to take it out. So the outside is cooked, I can tell already, because it's wanting to kind of fall apart. So I'm going to turn it over this way and let the inside leaves start cooking. Okay, at this point the cabbage is cooked enough. Okay, you don't have to overcook the stuff. Let's make a little bit of a sauce. I'm going to be throwing a little bit of diced onion. The brown stuff that you see inside there is actually corned beef that was on the cutting board. Dried parsley. Touch of garlic powder. You can use fresh garlic if you want. Got a half a stick of butter. And I have this on low right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just saute these onions for a while until they become translucent. If you're a little worried about this browning, you can always put just a little bit of olive oil in there. That will help prevent it from burning. If you wanted to take a little bit of the broth, you could put a little bit of the broth inside here too. I don't think it's really necessary, but you could if you wanted. I'm going to turn it down to low, and I'm going to put a little half and half in this. You could put heavy cream if you wanted to. If you wanted to, you could put a little bit of flour or something, cornstarch, to almost turn it into a gravy. With a half and half, or if you used heavy cream, what's going to happen is as the water starts leaving, this will naturally thicken. Right now it's on about medium, and I'm just kind of waiting for this to thicken up a little bit naturally. Okay, and it will. If you use heavy cream, it will thicken up a lot more because it's got a lot more fats in it. That's good enough. I've done one more thing, and that is I've taken some butter and I've just mixed it with parsley and mixed them together, and so now we have what's known as a compound butter. We're going to heat this up in the microwave. We have our compound butter. We can put a little bit of the butter over the corned beef. We could put a little bit of the compound butter also over the cabbage, a little bit over the carrots, a little bit over the potatoes, basically over everything. It's really just dependent upon you. And then now we have our creamy white sauce here, and that is definitely good over the potatoes. And it doesn't really hurt to even put a little bit over the top of the corned beef. You want to put a little bit on top of the cabbage? Go right ahead. The corned beef is not going to be as red as you're used to seeing because we didn't end up using what's known as a pickling salt, okay? We didn't add any of the nitrites to it, okay? Nitrites I'm sensitive to, and it's really only used for like preserving things a little bit longer. It can alter the taste ever so slightly, but I find that it's not really needed. We end up having our cabbage here, which is got an amazing flavor because we boiled it in the exact same water that we boiled our corned beef in. We got our carrots, we got our potatoes, we ended up having our white sauce, which is just going to put everything over the top. And I didn't have to add salt to anything during the time that I was doing this except for the white sauce. I didn't have to add salt because there was enough from the corned beef, from the brine. Okay, so it's going to have the perfect amount of salt. Anyway guys, that is that. If you like this video, make sure you click like, make sure you hit subscribe. Check out my other recipes on drchillskitchen.com. Link in the description. And until next time, talk to you later.
Oh, I like this this onion sauce.
There's still a little bit more left.
It's very subtle. I'm talking with my mouth full of food. The cabbage is cooked well. It has a crunch. I like it when it crunches. I don't like it when it's soft and mushy. Oh, I like this. This cabbage is really good. I could eat that cabbage by itself. It's good. Even the carrots are good.